Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey, good people. Welcome. Welcome to the 12th episode of Connected. I am your host, Andrea Dragonfly. In this Connecting Consciousness series, I'm talking about the complexities of energy and how it relates to our human experience. And so it's really about how every aspect of our lives is generated by this energy. And even the relationship of energy when we're born into our culture, our family dynamics, there's this outside energy that works with us, creates this energy relationship, as well as external forces, which could be planetary forces and spiritual forces of benevolent and malevolent beings, as well as the energy that lives within us. And that's the energy that we produce through our thoughts and our emotions, and then how we attract energy back through this vibration. So this talk series is really about the complexities of how we are experiencing life based on the energy output and what we attract in. So if you're coming to this show for the first time, welcome. And of course, if you've been following along, well, it's great to have you back. Here we talk about things that are not necessarily common knowledge. So last week, we were looking at ego development and how there's these two spiritual forces. And I'm going to call them the big evils. There's these two spiritual forces that actually help us develop our ego relationship. And that first force is known as an ahrimanic force. And this is a force that is related to judgment. And then there's a second force known as the luciferic force. And this is related to temptation. And how these two forces came in during the development of this time. Now, this time is a very large span of time. I'm going to call it an epoch, which is a very large span of time. But this is how we are developing our ego consciousness. And it's over a very, very large span of time, thousands of years, maybe even millions, depending on where we are getting our information from. And so this is information that's coming to you, and it may be, because it's new, it may be hard, to kind of really understand. So it's an invitation to try it on, invitation to work with this energy, this information, and bring it into your field. This is ancient wisdom. This is information that comes from esoteric Western mystery schools and texts and whatnot. And so this is information that we don't have access to, that these things have been buried or hidden or even destroyed. So now is the time for all this information to come forward. So again, this conversation is different. And so I, again, just have, it's an invitation to try on things that might be new. How do they feel? And sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to really let it inform us. So it's about stretching a little bit and inviting it. Is this true? And at the very beginning, the very first show, I talked about body talk and about asking your body to show you yes and no. Is this work for me? Is this true? Right? And so this is how we begin to develop relationships as to how does this really work, for me? And of course, my sharing with you is coming from my perception, my interpretation, and it really is to add it to what you already know. We've been also talking about reincarnation and how there is multiple lives, how we experience these multiple lives. I'm going to be talking about that some more in our time together. But I also want to be incredibly sensitive, because I know that there's people who are still connected into that one lifetime theory and teachings within the Christian faith. And so, but this is also just an invitation again. Try it on, sit with it, because there's also had the reincarnation theory for a long time, up until about 530, I believe, AD. So this is, again, going to be jumping into a fun conversation. Now, I also have some notes, just so you know, so I might be looking to the side just in case I have some things that I want to make sure that I bring into the conversation. And but where we're going to begin, with specifically talking about this ahrimanic force, which is judgment. We're going to look at judgment versus discernment. And that's going to be pretty much what we talk about tonight, because we're going to kind of dive deeper into all of that and get more of a deeper understanding of how that energetically impacts us, and how everything that we're experiencing has connections to that, right? So I'm going to start off by saying that this is an intro. It's like Cliff Notes, because talking about the origin of this force leads to a whole nother conversation that's pretty complicated, and we're not going to get into that conversation tonight. But what's essential to get out of this is that this ahrimanic force is a spiritual force, and it is very old. And we think about time, time between what we know time here on the earthly realm. It's very different in the cosmic realm. And this force was actually an energetic spiritual force that helped develop the angelic realm. And again, that's another conversation. But it was this force that really pressured, when we have certain energetics that pressurize us, put us into some sort of conflict, some sort of, some sort of, adversary within, our relationship to our situation, whatever, it begins to work us. And it works us in a way that eventually we form into these very high conscious beings. And that's part of the angelic's form and how they came into being. And that's, again, another story. But that force was very much the oldest that I'm aware of at this point in time. Doesn't mean that it is the oldest, because we live in an infinite cosmos. So, but it's one of the most recent other forces besides this Luciferic force. And again, this is all before the descent of humanity coming onto this earthly realm. And again, that too is part of this other conversation. So what's important to get from this is that this is a force that is very much about helping us. I'm going to say it's helping us choose. It's about freedom, free will, and choice. So it helps us choose the path of the higher vibrations. And this is that love, this is that light, this is that benevolent energy. This is that kindness and that, the good that lives within us as human beings that sometimes people can get lost from throughout their life and incarnation and all sorts of things, right? And so this force has a very specific play in the forming of humanity and where we're going. So we haven't even had the conversation of who are we, where do we come from, and where we're going. That also is going to be part of upcoming conversation. Yet in this time frame that we have together, we're looking about how this force comes in, and it's a manipulative force. So when we have these forces of malevolent energy, mal meaning also translates to be bad, but it's also this destructive energy. It's energetics that want to pull apart and eventually some way destroy. And then we have what's called the constructive energy. And this is that creation energy as well. So this is the energies that come together to create something brand new. And so the energetic of this Ahrimanic force is a destructive energy. And the way that we see it, it comes through judgment. Now, of course, there are several definitions for judgment. So even like look it up, right? Like go online, look at judgment, see what these different definitions are, because what it really comes down to is it really comes down to actually making a conscious decision or coming to some sensible conclusion. This is the Google definition that I have up here. Another form of it is a misfortune or a calamity that is viewed as a divine punishment. So like Judgment Day, if you weren't a good person, then you are not going to, be chosen to go to heaven in a Christian sense, right? But then there's the other form of judgment. And that other form of judgment is really about where we are expressing an opinion against someone else and making them bad or wrong. And in some way, it's because we think that we are right or that we're better or that we have a better understanding. So there's this judgment about right or wrong, good or bad. And that judgment comes into that place that says, I don't like what you're doing. And therefore, because it's not what I'm doing and what I like, it's bad or wrong. And it's not that it's bad or wrong, it can just be different. And this is also a big conversation of humanity. It's that just because people are different than us doesn't mean they're bad or wrong. It just means different, right? And so we're looking at this judgment, and this judgment can come in two different ways, and we're going to explore those ways this time together. We're going to be looking at it from a collective level and how judgment lives in the collective, which is group thinking, and how groups of people have these beliefs. And that judgment can then come into a grand belief. And we're going to talk about the isms. And the isms, of course, are those, we're going to call them these judgments that in some way have a destructive energy to them. They create what's called separation. And so with separation, if we're thinking about destruction and destructive energy, it's trying to get in there and pull things apart. And that's what some of this collective energy is about. It's about if we can keep the people separate, if we can separate them in these different ways, then it's easier for the dominant group, the power, the control, and the authority to rule over them. So this has actually become an energetic that has kind of developed over the human timeline. And of course, we can even just see how it has fully come into its fullness in our modern day and looking in the news, right? So we can look at how these judgments, but also we may be experiencing these ourselves. We may be at the effect of them, or we may be actually, affecting others with them. So again, tonight we're looking at having a deep dive into looking at this. We're also going to look at how this works for us on an individual level. So again, we're looking at it on a collective level about how group thinking has played a very large part in the creation, shaping of our human experience. And then we're going to look at it more closer to home, right here inside ourselves, and about how it has helped us, or I don't know if helped is the right word, but how it has formed us to be who we are and has influenced our life experiences, and how it, more or less has created our experience. You know, there was a saying that I had learned in my IPEC coaching, and I think it was just one of my trainers who I was working with, and she was like, "What would your life be like if you never were judged? How might you show up differently?" And I was like, "Wow, that's powerful." So we're going to even look at that for ourselves tonight. So we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. And when we get back, we're going to dive right on in. So enjoy, and I'll see you in 2 minutes.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hey there, welcome back. So we are looking at this harmonic force known as judgment. And this is that judgment where we are really looking at somebody else or groups of people in a way that separates us from them, that says, you know, you're bad, you're wrong, I don't like what you're doing, or I don't agree, or all of that. And of course, within our culture, we can see a lot of that. We can see how that shows up in a lot of different groups. And we have such crazy groups on both sides of the political scales, right? You know, and all of the different groups in between. And we're going to take a little look at that. But before we jump into the isms, because this is really what that creates, it creates the isms of our experience. I also want to talk a little bit about discernment and about how discernment actually is the higher spiritual decision-making when we're being confronted with things that may not be what we identify for what we want, right? So it's about, we can recognize that things are happening or that people are going to be so incredibly different and unique. And it doesn't mean that we want that for ourselves, but it means that we also recognize that humanity is going to be incredibly diverse and that there's going to be all sorts of different kinds of people. And it's really within this discernment that we get to choose what we believe is what's right for ourselves. And so discernment also has different definitions. I looked up on Google before I got here and whatever, you know, Merriam-Webster, all that kind of stuff. But it's the ability to judge well, but I like to add for oneself. So we know what we want for ourselves, but what we want for ourselves doesn't mean it's what other people want for themselves. And we talked a little about, well, I guess in one of the shows, of course, we talked about at the very beginning, probably the second show, is about how we are all such very unique individuals and that our life experience is going to form us. But also, I introduced the idea of reincarnation and karma. And again, karma, that's going to be a whole nother conversation because there's lots involved in karma. But, but we're also looking about how we come in for different things in different lifetimes. And that we're going to be experiencing over different lifetimes all of these different differences. So if we hold a very strong, let's say, judgment, this harmonic force, against another person or group of people, then we probably, possibly will reincarnate into being part of that group or having that way about oneself in another lifetime, so that we understand what it's like, these differences between us. And so when we look at these isms, and I'm talking about these isms are a collective belief that have developed over time, right? And so again, this is group thinking. And in sociology, these isms can also mean, I don't want to say they can also mean, but they're connected to what's called systemic violence, because systems have then been kind of formed and created that perpetuate the thinking, this thinking that, of superiority, of I'm better than you in some way. And that, and so we're looking at some of these, we're looking at, first and foremost, racism. So this is a racial hierarchy. So we're looking at like a person's color might be better, or there's the belief that some people hold that the color of a person's skin or the place of origin or the culture they come from is superior to one over the other. And so when we're in it and we're together as a collective humanity, and if we have if we connect into the reincarnation aspect of it, we are not separate. We recognize, we can see, that sometimes there are all sorts of different kinds of people. And, whether you're coming from any of the continents with any different kinds of skin colors, that these are a form of judgment that's destructive. It creates that separation. And again, there are no good people on one side and the other. And we can even look at this in politics. I'm not political in the form of, sides, because this is what I'm going to say. Like, even if I bring in this two political sides of, let's even just say Republican, Democrat, it's that you got good people on the Republican side and you got bad people on the Republican side, and you got good people on the Democratic side and you got bad people on the Democratic side. We have good people in every shape and size and color. And we have bad people in every shape and size and color. And when I say good and bad, I'm talking about good as constructive, creative, creation energy. But let's come together and build something and let it, transform into something new. That creates something great. And then bad, I'm referring in my language to something destructive, to destroying something, pulling apart, separating, isolating, creating these energetics that in a certain form is not part of our energetic design. We want to be, we're people and we want to be around other people. We are very much part of the community group village energy. And it's not healthy or good for us to be isolated unless you're, the hermit, the sage on the top of the mountain, and you're already deeply connected to divinity, right? But when we get isolated, we get separate, and we get separated, and then we can have, our psychology, our psychosis can get very dark. And that's because that dark energy, that our harmonic energy has a lot of additional, I'm going to call them beings, energy beings that connect with that. And so we have good energy beings, and we have and helpful. So again, creative, constructive, helpful. Those are the benevolent energy beings. And we also have what I'm calling the malevolent, unhelpful energy beings. So when we get isolated, when we get put into these places, we can have these other unhelpful energy beings come in and kind of spin us out and make us, feel many things. But tell us stories that we're disconnected and that we're not part of the whole, can tell us all sorts of things. And again, these are different conversations that we're going to be having through the rest of the summer and into the fall and all that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of information here. So when you try to talk about everything and how it's all connected, there are so many tendrils of connections that go into all sorts of different directions. So here, we're looking again at the isms. And so there's the racism, the racial hierarchy, there's classism, there's sexism, there's ageism, there's even heterosexism, which is, of course, the sexual orientation, which for many people have, still uncertain, and a lot of people judge that. And a lot of people are coming into an awareness that, hey, you know what, normally people don't, it's not easy to choose. It's not easy to be gay in the world. It really isn't. And it's not like they choose that, especially if the family members are very against it. It's something that a person feels. If you feel sad and if you feel depressed, it's sad and depressed because you feel it. But when you feel like you're attracted to another, same-sex relationship, it goes far beyond depression and, sadness for a period of time. This is a wiring that lives within somebody. This is an incarnation that came in to have this experience. And it's going to be different. And different, again, isn't bad. It's just different. Now, there's other isms, of course, in the world. Like there's, and I wrote them down, so I'm going to look at them. But there's ableism, colonialism, conservatism, cynicism, favoritism, right? Even in the family dynamic, imperialism, negativism, pessimism, sadomasochism, skepticism, and terrorism, right? Now, those are just a handful and whatnot. There's more. But when we look at that, what it does is that it shows us that there's a separation. A separation is occurring. And I'm even just going to pick out favoritism because we can see that in group dynamics, who's the teacher's pet, or who's the most loved in the family, or who's whatever, you know what I mean? Like there's the favoritism. And so we can even, and I'm just using that one as a very simplified term because I think many people can relate to that one, or at least I relate to that one in particular, right? But again, it comes down to the fact that we're not separate from one another. So it's and oftentimes we can feel that way. And oftentimes our life experiences are going to certainly have some of these powerful energy dynamics. And, and I want to remind everybody that as individuals within the me, we can be judged against. We could be judged for how we look. We could be judged for what we said off the cuff. We could be judged for, oh my goodness, all the different things, right? Being too tall, being too small, being too fat, too skinny, too outgoing, too introverted. All of the other isms, our color, our style, it doesn't matter, right? So we can experience that, or even in the work environment, we can be judged in a way that is like, oh, that person's work ethic isn't, as good as X, Y, and Z, or whatever. I don't know. But because the dynamics of humanity are so complex that there's going to be all sorts of different kinds of scenarios, right? But then we also, we can be judged individually, but then we can also, again, be judged collectively. And again, this is part of these group dynamics that are fighting to be seen. They're fighting to be heard. They're fighting to be validated, right? Acknowledged in the fact that, hey, we're not different. I mean, we may have different, aspects to whatever makes us different, but really together we're a whole. We're a whole humanity. And it's about this ego judgment. Let me reframe, because it's not about ego judgment. It's about this judgment that develops the ego. That ego that says, am I contributing to this dense harmonic force and perpetuating the problem? Or do I actually want to step into a more conscious life that's going to bring me into a higher vibration? Because that dense is low vibration. That harmonic force is a dense, low vibration. And with dense, low vibrations, it brings hurt, it brings pain, it brings emotional suffering, it brings I'm not good enough, it activates all of our wounds. And, it certainly invokes anger and resentment. And so these are things that we're looking at in the media. This is one of the reasons why it's like, oh yeah, now's the time to have this conversation, because I was just kind of scrolling through the media and I was just looking at all this energetic, hate and anger and separation, and I'm better than you, and these, especially in the politics, and it's on both sides, right? And so it's really painful to experience. And it's like, hey, humanity, we're at the effect of a dense energy and we can choose something different. This is part of that ego development. This is the part that's going to move us into a different direction where we can be creators. We can create the new world that we're coming into, because again, I've been saying this all along, the world is changing and more people are waking up, and more people need to recognize that the root of some of this is within our judgments. It's within the collective judgment, and even within the politics. This is about, I know what I want for you, not about what's best for you. It's about what I want for you, right? And I even think about this within reproductive rights as a woman. And I've worked with lots of people who are on from all sorts of different socioeconomic backgrounds. And the power of reproductive rights for an individual is an individual decision. It's a decision that each person in their own karmic journey, within their own incarnation, has to make that decision specifically for themselves, because everybody's going to have a different perspective. And it's not one person's perspective. It is a perspective that is essential, that is the growth of us individually and collectively, that we get to make those decisions on our own. And then we get to have the experience of what that means, however painful or hard that is, right? So again, yes, I'm talking about abortion here, and that this is not something that anybody can make a decision for somebody else. This is that very unique, individual, karmic and powerful soul developing, ego developing decision that people have to make on their own, whether you like it or not. It's not about you. You get to choose in your discernment what's best for you. But judging others for making decisions what's best for them is completely different, because you don't know their life. You don't know their experience. You don't know their karma. You don't know the journey, the spiritual journey that they're on. So we are going to take another break here. I'll be back in 2 minutes and we'll dive in once again. So I'll see you back here shortly.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hey, welcome back. Yes, we are talking about the isms of the world. We are talking about judgment and about having belief systems that create separation, that say, in some respect, that my beliefs, my idea, me, is in some way better than you. And as very, complex people in the world, and because there's over 8 billion of us, that there's so many different belief systems. There's so many different versions of that. So we're looking at how can we become like understanding and tapped in to the fact that this energetic has been dominating cultures. I mean, we can just even look at the cultures around the world and how there's so many different cultures that have very much like a very strong belief that this is the way that you have to behave. And if you don't behave that way, then you're bad or you're wrong. And how many cultures around the world even have like homosexuality as, as an offense, a sin that is, like the death sentence, that can be tried as a death sentence for just being, whoever that person is, for being their truth, their authentic expression. And of course, we also talked about how free will, freedom, and choice is a huge part of what we look at with the ego development. And when we're looking at this, and we're going to talk a lot more about this next week in the Luciferic temptation energies that we're also at the effect of. But when we look at this within this Ahrimanic tendency, this is that place that that we begin to recognize that everything that's happening in the world is an opportunity to teach us more about ourselves. And I'm going to reference even back, I believe it was episode 3, I brought in the energy self-perception chart and how there's these 7 levels of energy perception, and about how, the first 1 and 2 are all about ourselves and about anger, victimization, where we're in a lack. And then 3, 4, and 5 is about how we're mastering ourselves and mastering, how we can move ourselves into these higher vibrations. And then in 6 and 7, these are the circles of transcendence. And when we get to 6, it's about wisdom. It's about that everything that's happening in the world is happening for our development, our human development, our growth. And that even though there's horrific things happening in the world, genocides and all sorts of like unfair wars and, the horrors that people do to others, that they're ways for us to deeply know how that lives within ourselves. How, what are we choosing? Are we aligning with that? And we want to go to that dense, dark, destructive, and, I call it one of the big evils, that evil energy. And again, there's a whole level of energetic beings that are even attached to that we will get to, that support that energy. And then, or do we really want to choose, to say, okay, that's happening. And it's not right or wrong or good or bad. It just is. It's the spiritual process. It's a big spiritual process. It's part of the divine design that is happening, that is helping me form myself. And of course, we don't have to agree with it or want it to happen, if we're already aligned with creation, constructive energies of the higher love and light and benevolent energies. However, when we are sitting there judging and saying, no, that's wrong, that's bad, then what we're doing is that we're recognizing that there's an affinity that lives within us that says, it's like pulling on a string. It's pulling on like a heartstring that says, ding, 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 ding. All people who are this way are bad. And we can group people together, right? So again, with the isms, it could be a certain culture, a certain kind of belief system. It could be a certain kind of person who, and I'm going to go into those hard places. It could be the serial murderer. It could be the pedophile, right? And of course, we do not want that for ourselves or our people, the people that we love. But if we're like so incredibly against it, then there's an opportunity for us to understand that something about that lives within us. It's activating us. It's called an affinity. An affinity means that I'm so vehemently passionate anti that somewhere within me that lives within me, whether that's something that I need to heal. Maybe I was that, maybe in a past life, or maybe I will become that in a future life and I know I'm bringing up some probably really hard stuff. And again, I've had a lifetime of knowing this kind of stuff. So if this is really new to you and the things that I'm saying are activating you and triggering you, I just invite you to play with this idea. Why do we get activated by such things? Such experiences, such people and place, in scenarios. But these are these opportunities. And again, I'm not saying that we need to like that, because we don't need to like that at all. That's evil in a certain way, right? That's destructive. That's harmful. That goes against people's free will and consent. And that's not the other side of where we want to be. But we recognize that these things exist, so that we can actually make these choices, work through these uncomfortable aspects of humanity, and move ourselves forward in a way that we can begin to free ourselves of the internal pain and suffering that those might cause us. Again, we are all incredibly different. No culture, no colored, groups of people, regardless of whatever color they are, Native Americans, Middle Easterners, whatever, right? Like, they're not all the same. They might have political ideologies that you may not like. And that's perfectly acceptable. That's part of the journey. It's part of the ego development. Or maybe they do have things that you really agree with and like. Right? But recognizing that this is for all of us. And when I say this is for all of us, let me clarify that, because I feel like I just kind of went out there really far. This is for all of us to work with, to explore, to try on, to put into our energy field, to move it around and say, where have I been? The judger, the person that has judged somebody else for being different. Where have I put that kind of, destructive or separating energy onto somebody else? Where has that happened to me, right? And so bringing it into so we're looking at the collective, we're looking at how this can be in cultures and groups and governments. It can be in large bodies of people. The United States is the melting pot of all cultures. So we're going to have pretty much everything here in the United States. However, if you're not in the United States and you're in other countries, look to see how has these very strong viewpoints of you have to do it this way. I mean, even being in Mexico with my Mexican community and my Mexican family, there's very cultural things about the family, and about how certain things need to be done. And I know that that's evolving because the time's evolving. And I see that with, the community that I'm there. But, so it's like at a certain point, we begin to evolve and recognize that actually there's more ways to do it, especially if we're loving, especially if we're coming from a different energetic of creation, of that, accepting, recognizing that I might be different from you. However, I'm also on the side of creative energies, and let's build something together, even if we are different in all these different ways, right? It doesn't matter if you are a homeless person or a billionaire. When we talk about, classism, it's like we can create with all of these people if we want to. It just depends on where you are in your life, right? So I just want to make that note. Now, again, I wanted to mention that this is a live show. So within the time that we still have, if you want to call in, there's a number below. You can ask questions. You can type them out. You don't have to call in and use your voice, but if you want to type in the chat bar, I'm happy to take any questions around this subject in particular. And I got a lovely message about it being the full moon tonight. And so, yes, I wish everybody, just want to bring that in because I just see it in the comments that tonight is the Sagittarius full moon, a full moon in Sagittarius. And it's coming with lots of really powerful energy. So fully connected into that. But when we move it back into, working with our individual experience, is starting to recognize if we want to move forward and deepening our spiritual connection and becoming more conscious and more connected, it's about nurturing and taking care of these connections and recognizing who are we being, what's our energy. And how am I either aligning with the creative energy or how I am aligning with the destructive energies that be? Because everything that we do, everything that we produce, all of our thoughts and our actions, all of our emotions has an energetic vibration that goes out into the world and impacts different people in different ways. And we may not know exactly to the depth of what that is, but if you have a person standing right in front of you and you aren't very nice to them, oh yeah, they feel it, right? But on a quantum level, you have a person, across the other side of the world and you still have the same type of energy and venomousy towards them, they're going to feel it too. Yeah. All right, we're going to take another break and then we're going to come back and we're going to connect into ourselves around this conversation. So I'll see you back here in 2.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation.
Welcome back. So we dove kind of deep into the conversation of judgment and about how we judge and when we judge. It really creates this energetic that goes out into the world and aligns with that negative. And when I say negative, I want to call it like malevolent and kind of more of the evils of the world of destruction, and that come with a whole bunch of other energetics that go along with that. And so this is a time for us just to do a little bit of a reflection and recognize, who are we in our experience to what's happening in the world? And I want to just let you know that you're going to have your experience, and your experience is perfectly perfect for you. Your experience is teaching you something. Your experience is offering you the opportunity to learn something, right? If we take it. And so within that, wherever each person is exactly the right place to be. Can't be anywhere else. And it's also noteworthy to say that because we're such different people, we're going to all have a different relationship to energy and to judgment and to how it's showing up in the world, how it shows up towards us even, and how we might even give it out, especially with the people that are closest to us, your significant partners or the people in your life, your family, your best friend, whomever. It's just important to recognize that this is where we get those heated debates. This is where you never talk about politics, sex, and religion at, Thanksgiving dinner table with the family, right? This is where, because there's very passionate beliefs that have very powerful judgments attached to them. So I'm going to invite everyone who is willing, of course, freedom, free will, and choice, to close your eyes and take 3 nice, big, long, deep breaths. We're just going to shift our energy for a moment here. Feel your body relax as you're taking these nice, deep breaths. Shake off all that was said. If there's anything that was mentioned that triggered a reaction in you, just shake it out, let it go. Know that there's no intention for ill will or harm in that. And with your eyes closed, bring your attention into your heart space. I'm going to call it your sacred imagination. And sacred is just that divine energy, that conscious energy connected to everything. Bringing it into your heart space. And first, I would like for you to connect into a time in your life where you felt judged for anything. I just really want you to tap into the scenario. However long ago it was, it could have been this morning, or it could have been 30 years ago. or any time in between. Just tap into how that made you feel. What did it activate in you? Because oftentimes there's a story there. And it can be anything from, I'm not good enough, I'm not fill in the blank, right? In some way, enough. And I invite you to go deeper into that experience and almost feel about how it had that destructive quality. What was it doing within your energy field? Where did it take you? This is how we grow, as we get connected into ourselves and what's happened to us. And sometimes it can leave us in this place of sadness and isolation. So many different places. Each individual is so unique. So it's also just connecting into that space. And to be human, we're all going to experience that on some level because of all those isms I talked about, right? And of course, different degrees of it. But also I invite you to think about how other people have experienced really profound judgment against them. And you can even take a person that you know. Maybe this is someone in your own family. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's a colleague. Or maybe it's somebody on TV, the media, a political figure. Who knows? But I invite you to really explore how this destructive energy can work on one person. And then how it can work on many people, groups of people that are different. And for a moment, try to understand what would it be like to be in that person's shoes, to be in that environment, right? And you already know what it's like for you, but take on a whole nother bigger scenario. Take on, what would it be like for a transgendered person? What would it be like to be a person of a different culture and country and color, right? Or a different political party even, right? So again, I'm just inviting you to really sit into how this is this energetic that is about destruction and about how it's an opportunity for us to get really clear on ourselves and how we are in this world. What do we want to align with? How can we also inspire others possibly to get connected into this conversation? Especially with politics coming in and all sorts of sides fighting about what their beliefs and judgments are. Remember, it comes down to free will. It comes down to everybody's on their own journey. And then everybody essentially needs to choose for themselves. And so I know I'm pulling some things here. I'm kind of stretching you a little bit. But I invite you to take this into the week, play with it. Look at it from these different perspectives. We are at the end of our time together, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. And it's always a pleasure to bring this information. If you have any reflections, questions, feedback, anything like that, you are welcome to visit me at my Facebook or Instagram page at connected.dragonfly. You can also submit any comments on my YouTube channel at Andrea Dragonfly, or visit my website at www.andreadragonfly.com and meet me there. And by all means, it's always a pleasure. Go out into the world, recognize who you are, what you're doing, and what your impact is, and find the connections. All right, enjoy.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.